everyone who's coming into the webinar. Hello. Few people in here. Great. All right, well, I'm going to start with some introductions. So my name is Casey Dowder. I am the Director of Leadership Advancement. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on online classroom tips and tricks. Super excited to be able to bring this to you as college students, as alumni members who may be working from home and need to know, some different aspects of working in this environment. We are so grateful today to have one of our faculty advisors and a past National Council member, David Serafini. He is going to be leading our webinar today. And then we also have our chapter consultant, George Denny. He is going to be here to answer any questions you may have based on, chapter meetings and how they can run within Zoom or in another platform. But we are in Zoom here today to kind of be able to show you all, if you haven't had the chance to come in. We're hearing this is where a lot of meetings and schoolwork is going to be taking place. So if anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I will be monitoring that throughout the webinar. And I'm going to then now turn it over to David. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. Hopefully everyone is doing well. All things considered, we are in a really unusual time, needless to say. But this is a time where we can be true brothers for one another and look out for each other as we're all sort of navigating through this new world. So I'm going to go through for about maybe 20-25 minutes, and then we can address questions if there are any. Online classroom, online classes, tips and tricks. So here we go. Okay. You're going to see a whole lot of memes popping up if you haven't already on social media about taking classes online. And you see I included one there. Not everyone has taken an online class before. There are pros and cons to taking a course online. I think the biggest pro is you can go at your own pace. Particularly if it's like a summer session or a winter session, you really have to cram an entire semester's worth of work in, but at the same time, you're not juggling a full course load, so you can kind of spread things out a little bit more. The con is you can go at your own pace, and now you're not talking about maybe one or two classes to take, you're talking about an entire semester's work. And some of you may have things like labs, or you have to do performances. I've got students at WKU and some of the other groups I advise are asking about how do we take a PE course online or a swimming class or something like that. So it is going to be a very different world than what you're normally used to. But hopefully I've got some good advice here to help you all navigate through things. So let's start. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. Okay. Some of the basics first. Make sure if you have a reliable laptop or PC. I know a lot of us like using these things, and for functions like Blackboard, you can certainly do that, but it's going to be a little more tricky to do certain things via the phone, particularly if your professors are sending out things in PDF, or if you still have to do that research paper or what have you. If you do not have a reliable laptop or PC, laptops especially, check with your school. I know at my home institution at WKU, they have accelerated the laptop rental program, where they do have a decent supply, and they are getting more for those students who need to check one out and utilize that for the duration. So there's a possibility. I would check also with your university's library to see if they are going to have any kind of hours. I know several states are going on lockdown, including this weekend. But like, again, at my home institution, our library, there's going to be a dedicated space set up where studying can still take place. They do have computers in there. So just check to see if that's available. Do you have a reliable internet connection? I will go ahead and say mine is a little wonky at times, and so that sort of causes some problems. It may be for you also, particularly if you use Spectrum, because it is Spectrum. Now, having said that, Spectrum did just sent out an email the other day about what they're doing to help navigate through what we're going through right now. And that included free broadband and Wi-Fi for 60 days for K through 12 and college students. I personally don't know how that would work. I would get in touch with Spectrum in your area to see if that's available to you. And again, if you don't have a reliable internet connection, um, check with your university's library to see if they are going to be open. I think most public libraries are probably closed right now, as are places like Starbucks and things like that. This is an important one. Do you have a dedicated space to take class? You don't want to take class from bed, as tempting as that might be. Set up some space in your apartment, at home, wherever you are, to where you're going to be able to work on your schoolwork on a daily and consistent basis, and make that your new sort of mini office for the duration. Studies have shown that if you try and do any kind of work in bed, even in a residence hall bed, you're not going to do very well. That includes reading your materials or taking notes or what have you. In your dedicated space, and if you are going to be doing things like this on Zoom, or if your instructors may utilize another function to do virtual classes, things to remember: keep your mic muted. Again, a lot of the memes going around is uh, stuff about, you're going to hear dogs and little brothers and sisters or grandmas or whoever in the background, and that can of course be distracting. And this next one should be a no-brainer, but do I have things out that I wouldn't want other people to see, right? I mean, we're all messy. My apartment is messy. You don't want your classmates and your teacher to think that you live in just abject filth. So that's just a handy little reminder there. Keep in mind too, are you still working? I realize this may not apply to everybody, but if you are in some service industry that is still open right now, and you are still working that job, or maybe they're bumping up your hours, balance is going to be a key thing here for the next several weeks, of taking a semester's worth of classes online and doing all that work, and balancing a job with potentially more hours. If you're a restaurant or food delivery driver, maybe your local grocery store is bumping up your hours, something like that. Um, don't put things off to the last minute. Okay, so let's get to tip number one. Okay, this kind of goes with some of the last things I just said. Most importantly, set up a schedule for yourself. Probably the best thing to do is to block out those hours, 5 days a week, where you normally would have been in class. Dedicate that time to your classwork. We're in a point here where it's going to be really, really tempting to stay up all hours, get up super late, immediately hit Netflix or Hulu or start looking at videos of cats or whatever's on TikTok or what have you. But this is a whole different world now. And so online learning, and especially semesters worth, as it says up there, you're going to need a lot more self-motivation, organization, and discipline. So my first tip to you all, and big piece of advice, would be go day to day, Monday through Friday. That time that you normally would be in your coursework, in the classroom rather, go ahead and set that aside as your regular class time. If you know there's an assignment that you could be working on, if there's an online quiz, if a lecture's been posted, and you have that class at Mondays at 9 o'clock anyway, dedicate Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever, at 9 o'clock to that coursework. And when it comes to that scheduling, I think the other thing too is going back with balancing work, balance life. And that's something I'm going to come back to later on in all this, and that is taking care of yourself through all of this as well. So, tip number two. This sounds like it's a no-brainer, but really get dressed. I have seen this a lot from individuals who do work from home anyway. Um, it is tempting to sit around in your pajama pants and whatnot all day long, and particularly when it comes to school, but online schooling. But getting dressed for the day is going to put you into that mindset of work and interaction. I think we all do this, where after we get ready for the day and shave, shower, and all that good stuff, and put clothes on, doesn't have to be fancy clothes or just whatever. We're in a much better mindset to actually get to the tasks of the day, even if you're not seeing anyone, even if there isn't something like a Zoom lecture or what have you. Again, it's all about the mindset that you've got these tasks ahead of you for your courses. Now it's time to get to work on it. Tip number 3: pay attention to deadlines. Dates and times are going to matter. And so pay attention to what day things are due, specifically the time that they're due. If you are an out of state student to your school and you're utilizing Blackboard, double check with your professor so that he or she or they can double check if need be. Is Blackboard on campus time or is Blackboard on your time? We have that situation here in Kentucky, for example. I have a lot of my students who are actually in the Eastern time zone, but Blackboard is on WKU time, which is in the Central time zone. So if I put down something is due at a certain point, it could cause certain issues and certain problems. And so again, line up those deadlines, budget your time, make sure that you're staying on task. The other thing about this too is if you know something is timed like a quiz, definitely pay attention to the time limit. If something is due at midnight, for example, and you have a 30-minute time limit, it's X amount of questions or it's a short answer, don't start it at 10 to 12. You're not going to have enough time. Probably won't do a very good job. Tip number 4: take care of your technology. Make sure that batteries are charged, you're plugged in before starting the quiz or test or the saved assignment. Save things to the cloud if need be, save things on a flash drive. One of the things we try and tell our students who are working on Blackboard for discussion posts, or if it's something longer, which we all probably are going to encounter now, type all that out in a Word document first. Don't attach the Word document itself, but copy and paste. That way you can kind of look through things, edit for grammar and spelling and all that good stuff, and then you can go ahead and post it that way. But again, double check to make sure how assignments are supposed to be submitted, that sort of thing. Tip number next: find interaction where you can. This is hard online. But what I have found and what I do in my online classes is I try and get them to interact, my students, get them to interact with one another in a non-academic way. I set up a discussion board that I literally call the water cooler, where we can gather around like an episode of The Office and we can talk about whatever. And so we'll talk about movies, TV shows, what's going on in the world. Probably won't do that lately. That sort of thing. But interact and engage with them. And that's going to be a little weird at first, particularly because, you're not seeing these people face to face, but I would find someone or a few people to communicate with, maybe do an online or a virtual study group, that sort of thing. Maybe even now more so than ever before, as opposed to a face-to-face class. Tip number 6. Okay, so this is for things like discussion boards. Kind of a no-brainer thing, but it's always a good reminder. Pay attention to what you say and how you say it. You may not realize it, but there is a lot of subtlety with written language. And so again, things like sarcasm, anger, happiness, humor, all comes across in totally different ways when words are written and not spoken. And so the benefit of writing to communicate as opposed to speaking is you can go back and reflect on and edit and change what you've written before you actually quote unquote say it. Something else I would suggest, and I do this for my face-to-face courses too, is before you hit that submit button on the discussion post or the essay you've got to assign or you've been assigned or what have you, read it out loud to yourself or read it out loud to roommate, sibling, parent, your puppy, whatever. If something sounds wrong or odd, or maybe causes you to rethink, chances are it is odd, wrong, or you should rethink it. We punctuate as we speak. I still do this when I do my writing. I usually wind up saying it to myself, but nevertheless, and you can sometimes catch grammatical errors or what have you better that way than just staring in front of your Word document. Tip number 7. This is going to be a hard one, but take handwritten notes for lectures that may be posted through media site or YouTube, announcements, textbooks that you're reading for the course. You remember and retain a lot more information by writing it down than just typing it out, or you're simply reading the material or what have you. You've probably heard professors say this before. You may even have heard professors say the contrary to this, but we're going to go with my version. Don't highlight textbooks. It doesn't work. You have a really colorful textbook at that point. If you think something is important, write it down. And so again, act as if you are in a regular face-to-face class environment. Find a notepad, notebook, what have you, to where you can keep those handwritten notes in and keep things organized and dedicated to that, to where you can go back. And particularly for things like this, for example, if there are lectures on media site or YouTube, write things down, and just like in a classroom, you can make a notation of, hey, I didn't understand this. I need to email the professor and get some clarification. Tip number 8, communicate with your professor early and often. Remember, this isn't like being in a classroom where you can raise your hand in the middle of a lecture, or you can go to office hours or what have you. Email, check your email multiple times a day. Your professor may post that they might have virtual office hours where they may be online somewhere like Zoom, or you can Skype with them or do the Google call or what have you. But definitely keep in touch with your professors, especially if there's something you don't understand, you need clarification, you just have a question, etc. We want to hear from you. Tip number 9. Okay, be kind to yourself and be kind to others. First of all, um, again, with the discussion post, sometimes we write things without intending to come across in a certain way. Check with, for clarification before, you start attacking people's discussions, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the big thing is we're all in this together. Again, this isn't an ordinary time. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Check in with your classmates, check in with your friends, check in with the other brothers in your chapter. I know we're all kind of stuck and cooped up. Make sure you're eating as right as possible. Drink plenty of water. Try and get some kind of exercise. Try and make lemonade out of a whole bunch of lemons right now. And finally, last tip. I forgot to put tip number 10 there, but definitely be patient. We have never had to do certain courses online before. Again, imagine being in a swimming class right now. I've got some senior level classes that aren't really designed to be online because they're more seminar formatted. And so I'm having to rethink things. A lot of my colleagues have never, ever taught online. I have one colleague has never used Blackboard in his life. So we are going to feel our way through a lot of this, just like a lot of you are. We're all in this together. Keep some good humor about it all. I think your professors definitely are going to keep some good humor about it. I know I am. You will probably see, if you haven't seen already, Zoom has some really cool functions in here, to where we've got the chat box going on the right hand side. There's some features there for the raise your hand if you have a question. There's polling. There's a way to for the host, like Casey is doing, to share material on the screen, sometimes sharing videos or music or what have you. Can even change the background. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. I think you have to have a totally blank wall behind you and maybe some pictures ready to go as if it's a green screen. But let's make the best out of this. Again, what we're doing here is, there's something honorable in this. We are taking some pretty big inconveniences so that we can keep people who might be vulnerable members of our community that we don't know safe. At our schools, our colleges and universities, and even for our fraternity, we are a public institution for the public good. And again, there is something honorable in that. And for us being National Honor Fraternity, I think we can rise up to this challenge. So if you want to go to the last slide, you've got this. Again, it's not going to be 100% perfect. You're probably going to make a few stumbles here and there. You might be an online pro. If you are, fantastic. What I would do is reach out to your brothers in your chapters who may have never taken an online course, see if they need help in some way. Maybe you can answer some questions for them. But again, we're going to get through this. I think the last slide, I've got some contact information for me. There I am. So there's my email. There is, for some strange reason, I tweet occasionally, and then I am on the course. So if you have questions for me, if there's anything I can do for you, an advisor is an advisor, regardless of the chapter. So let me know, and I will certainly do whatever I can. But I appreciate you all being on today. And I guess we've got the chat box open on the side there. If we've got questions or comments, maybe I can talk about them. Or Casey or George.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. This was great. I think it was a great little first starter to kind of get everybody in the right mindset for settling in and getting ready to take those online courses. So if anybody has any questions for David or for George, please feel free to put them in the chat box. We'll be on here for a few more minutes, so we'll be able to take those questions.
And these are all really great skills, very transferable to work, both just in work experiences with online working or going through kind of distance working, but also just keeping in mind, like, these are great etiquette suggestions for how to approach emails, how to approach classes in general or work in general. Yeah, it looks like we started to have some questions.
Great. So James, he asked that he's taking a seminar class and he has to give a presentation over Zoom. Can anyone provide any advice?
Well, sure. So first of all, a lot of the things that we went through will apply to that. I think probably most professors will allow for a little bit of leeway and levity in this whole situation, since we are in all of this together. But at the same time, take it seriously. So, for that presentation, make sure that, again, you're in a spot where you don't have all kinds of distractions in the background and noise in the background, whatever. If you've got puppy, you want to keep puppy in another part of the house or the apartment or what have you. If you're supposed to be there, let's say for, I don't know what class you're talking about, James, but let's say, I'm just going to throw out a random example. If it's like a business and professional speaking course, I remember back in the day, and even my students now, when they're taking that, you have to come and give that speech, shirt and tie for the guys, right? So you might want to transfer some of those things and doing it. Pretend you're in the classroom, basically, is maybe that's the best way to sum it up. Now, the technology part of it, like if you've got PowerPoint, I haven't done this yet, but there is a way, if you are the host, you can upload that and share it. And there's a share screen function. Mm-hmm. Or you can probably email that to your professor, and they can, just like Casey did for my slides, upload it on their end and go through that way. But basically, treat it like you're in the classroom. I mean, the only thing that's different is that you're in your apartment or your home or something like that. George, you got anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think that there's two other components that might also be kind of helpful to keep in mind in terms of preparing to give that presentation over Zoom. I would definitely be sure that you're running through your presentation. I know for a lot of folks who do presentations in person, they'll kind of present it to a friend or just someone else in the class. Especially, reach out to some other folks in your chapter and see if they wouldn't mind you running through your presentation, and it might help to kind of get a feeling for where were the technical difficulties, just being sure that we're practicing that presentation style. And then also, there's some other capacities can be helpful. If you need to like drop in some notes, check into like dropping notes ahead of time, keeping those kind of nearby. One of the other useful skills for running a presentation is that unless you're using a webcam, usually your camera on your laptop is going to be at the top of the screen. So it's going to seem a little bit weird, but you're going to want to like look straight into that top of the screen, and only glance down if you like need to take a quick check. But if you want to do some good cheat sheets on the wall behind the screen, go ahead and have the details that you know that you're missing or that you're worried about. All the time. I do that whenever I do my all chapter workshops with chapters. Is I'll have my notebook on a stand behind my laptop. So if I start to get lost, I can look there. And then I have some notes like down by my hands that are just kind of just out of screen, so I can kind of keep everything, you know, consistent.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice, because if you're like me, like I'll FaceTime my dad because he lives in a totally different state, or you know, if I'm on something like this, I think we all either want to stare at ourselves or we're looking at the other, you know, the other people or whatever. FaceTime especially, I fall into this habit. I'm looking at myself in that little box for some reason, rather than looking at the camera or looking at my dad or looking at whoever. Sarah Smith has asked me, what has this experience been like for me as a professional, having to adapt quickly to a changing work environment? Controlled panic. um, in a sense, it, for me personally, it hasn't been bad because I have taught online, but usually in the winter or summer, and it's a condensed version of the course. Well, now I've got to stretch that out for the remainder of the semester. Again, my senior level courses, I've got, I'm still playing around with a few things. I'm having a Zoom meeting with them on Monday morning where I'm going to talk with them. I think the biggest thing, and we had a department meeting on Zoom earlier in the week, is it didn't hit me until that department meeting. Um, this kind of hurts. It really does. Believe it or not, we enjoy seeing our students every single day. My senior level class is great. We interact with each other. We have a good time in there. It's a serious course and it's a challenging course. But at the same time, I really enjoyed seeing them 3 mornings a week. So we know this is difficult for students, that students are upset that events have been canceled, student activities aren't going to happen the same way. Got to remember, this is just as hard for us in many ways, and I'm not talking about the professional part, I'm talking about the personal part. We really do love what we do, otherwise we wouldn't be teachers. You know, the research part of it is fine, but at the same time, you know, we're all called to teaching, and we really enjoy seeing you all. We're gonna miss that, and it really was. You know, I kind of had that sink in on Wednesday, and it's like, oh man, this is sad. Tips on how students should communicate with professors when not in Zoom, etc. Office hour. Well, hey Suzanne, I'm going to communicate to my students that I will have sort of virtual office hours, a dedicated time every day, Monday through Friday, twice a day, where I'm going to be in front of my laptop or my PC, and I will have Blackboard open. I'll be checking the discussion posts, the water cooler posts. I will be answering emails. In terms of etiquette, one thing I would add would be, if you're going to email your professor, in the subject line, I would put down a question about whatever the subject is, right? So like History 101, but also your section number, because instead of just one online class, now we've got 5 or 6, and it can get a little confusing because maybe a bunch of them are doing very, very different things. And so I would say that's a big, big piece of etiquette, is to put in the subject heading, you know, which class you're referring to. The other thing is, again, just kind of, you know, be honest in what you're asking about, or if you're having an issue with, I don't have a good laptop, I don't have reliable internet access, you know, we'll work with you. And I think that's the message coming across all colleges and universities right now. We're going to figure this out. George, and Casey, I think there's a question for you all from James.
Yes. George, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. Definitely reach out to your chapter consultant if you would like to have kind of like a more full conversation on this. I know throughout this past week, through the weekend and into next week, I've been having a lot of chats with students about meetings, elections, the initiation program, and other topics that are relevant for chapters. Kind of the short and sweet of it is try to keep as much structure from your program as you can, and then try to figure out how you can translate certain things online. So for example, for elections, a lot of our chapters go through this process of we have X many candidates and they're running for a position. So we'll ask them to leave the room. One person comes in, gives like a 1 to 2 minute speech on why they're the best candidate or however long your chapter is determined. And then from there, folks in the chapter will ask them a couple of questions and then they'll be sent out to the next person in, so on and so forth, until after all candidates have had a chance to kind of speak and answer some questions. They all go back out of the room and we go through pro-con debate and other parliamentary procedures. That structure in general is what I would aim to move onto the online platform. And so what this might look like is jumping into a Zoom web call and then asking those candidates to voluntarily pop out for a second, and then one by one, text them, let them know, okay, it's your turn, pop back into the web call, give their speech, have some moment for questions, and let people kind of pop back out. And then from there, be sure that you're using resources such as Google Forms or whatever kind of form software you prefer. I think Google Forms is really easy and user intuitive to pick up. But yeah, look at kind of the process that you can move online. As far as inductions, that's a little bit more of a more complex consideration. The National Council has gone ahead and passed a kind of an update on the idea that what we're aiming to do for this semester is be sure that we're doing the paperwork after final vote. But as for the ceremony of induction itself, that's probably going to happen in the fall term, whether you are a quarter school or a semester school. So just be sure that after we get to final vote on the initiates, that we are taking them from the initiate members in the chapter admin portal and moving them over to collegiate chapter members. And that way they are officially becoming brothers of the chapter. They are official members of the chapter. And we will do the physical induction ceremony whenever we get to the fall. So yeah, hopefully that helped to answer the question. Definitely check in with your chapter consultant and we'll be happy to jump into more detail.
Yeah, and Suzanne also just kind of put in for an answer to this question. Also for meetings, make sure you have an agenda and you stick with it, because I know online meetings can go a lot longer sometimes than planned because people just start chatting. So you want to have individuals log in, also 5 minutes ahead of time to limit delays and just to be patient with one another. So, give everyone a second, log in. If your meeting's starting at 7, definitely log in at least 5 minutes ahead of time. We would say for the presidents or whoever's running that meeting, be in there maybe 10 minutes just to make sure everything's running smoothly within your web platform. I know for webinars, when I do them when in Zoom or in our web platform, I'm on there a half hour, 20 minutes ahead of time, just because I like to make sure everything is running smoothly. The slides can transition. If I need to do a practice run, we can do that. We have that time before we start broadcasting. So
one thing I learned yesterday in Zoom, in using Zoom, is you can, you set up the time limit, I think, for a lot of these calls. Give yourself more than you think you're going to need on both ends. I'm not, again, I am hardly an expert on this because, like many of us across the country, I have started to use this and learned it literally this week. But that was one of the things we were taught was when you're scheduling the meeting, like for my class, allow yourself extra time at the front, extra time at the back, and when you're setting that up.
Definitely. Yeah, and I know when we used to use Zoom for our Lunch and Learn webinars, you can, for James, like your question about doing your presentation, you can click Enable Practice Session. So you can go into that webinar if you are the host,
Yeah.
and you can practice, and then you could send out, like I said, if you're setting up the like the Zoom meeting. You can go in and you could email maybe a couple members in your chapter, some classmates, have them jump into the practice session with you, and you can practice on your platform. You can practice outside the platform as well, but once you're ready, kind of do like a dress rehearsal for that. And I know that's really helped us with, not making sure the broadcast goes live before you want it to. And that practice session is good. So if you do go into a webinar 15 minutes ahead of time, you're not broadcasting to everybody. You're kind of just in there by yourself. So that's a really good tip too.
Yeah.
I think that's all we have for today. As George said, if any of you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email any of us on the national staff. We are all here for you. We're working normal business hours just from the comforts of our own homes. I'm in my basement petting my dog so he doesn't whine. That's why my arm is down here the whole time. So yeah, we're here for you. We are here to support you in your chapters as much as we can virtually. Please look at that virtual chapter operations doc. We're constantly updating that with new information as well. And we're looking forward, seeing how much your chapter can still, continue to grow. And we've been loving seeing all of the virtual events that you're holding with your initiates and your members to continue to keep that fellowship alive and our brotherhood alive. So we're really grateful to all of you. This is being recorded, so we will make sure it gets posted on our Facebook page, on YouTube, and in the core e-learning center. So anyone can watch it. So please let your members know if they couldn't attend live that they will be able to watch it. So thank you so very much.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you all soon.